When I was coming up with the title for this project, I couldn't really think of one, so I settled for the most pretentious title possible, which is Exploring Stop Motion Animation, Understanding and Implementing Stop Motion Animation Techniques in Short Films to Create Nostalgia-Evoking Effect. When I think back, a much more precise title would be using this project as an excuse to play around with the ideas I had for a while. So, idea number 1, quite simply, is to try out the technique of stop motion animation, since I have never done anything similar. What exactly is stop motion animation? Well, it's a filmmaking technique in which various objects are manipulated and captured in small time increments in order to create a fluid motion when the frames are played back. The film that inspired me to try out stop motion is Wes Anderson's Fantastic Mr. Fox. I love all the small details in it and how they create an imaginary world that feels uniquely real while still possessing Wes Anderson's signature style of filmmaking. Eventually, this led me to behind-the-scenes videos of Fantastic Mr. Fox and other stop-motion films. Though I felt like I learned a lot about set and puppet building, I think the most valuable takeaway from these videos is the importance of subtle movements the puppets should be making. These little details allow puppets to be emotionally expressive, which in return helps to keep the audience engaged. I also noticed that what makes me interested in the technique of stop motion are the little imperfections visible in the animation. They add a personality to the final product and make the filmmaker's touch present in the film. In Fantastic Mr. Fox, you can see a slight rippling effect in the fur of the puppets. This is because Anderson used real animal fur while making the puppets, resulting in animators' hands slightly changing the fur each time they touch the puppets. A similar effect can be visible in the 1933 film King Kong. For my stop-motion animation, I decided to mainly use clay, as it's not too difficult to source, it isn't expensive, and it is quite easy to mold and reshape. As a bonus, I like the way fingerprints are left on the surface of the clay. Since I didn't have any previous experience in stop motion, I made this little sequence to test my abilities. This taught me a couple of things. First of all, an overhead setup is possibly the easiest way to make my animation. Secondly, it is very important not to move the camera, so I needed to find a way how to activate the shot remotely. Lastly, I did not like the highlight on the table, so a soft source of light probably would be the best solution. With the help of my girlfriend, I started making the models that will be used in the animation. I needed to make a face with interchangeable features, so the character would be able to blink and express emotion. I also needed to create some TVs and clouds that will be used in the background. I then gathered some pebbles in the back garden to be used as the main surface of the set. To make editing easier, I placed the green screen both in the background and on the table. As I mentioned before, I needed a soft source of light, so I used a white shower curtain in front of some dado lights to make a DIY softbox. While making the animation, I also used an overhead setup I made from a C-stand and a couple of flag clamps after some failed experiments of trying to reposition a tripod. To activate the shutter of the camera, I used the Canon utility app on my computer, as it lets you control the camera remotely. After a lot of painstaking hours, I had finally gathered all the footage I needed, which brings me to my idea number 2, or the secondary goal for this project, which is nostalgia. I have always loved the idea of films that focus more on evoking a specific feeling rather than following a certain plot structure. These kind of films can impact in a much deeper emotional level, leaving the audience thinking about the film days after the viewing. For this project, I thought that a fitting emotion to evoke would be nostalgia, since stop-motion animation itself reminds me of being a child and watching cartoons in the morning before school. According to the Cambridge Dictionary website, nostalgia is a feeling of pleasure and also a slight sadness when you think about things that happened in the past. I think that a brilliant way to replicate such desire for the past is the usage of old and abandoned video formats that lately have seen a comeback both in feature and short films. Good examples are the use of 16mm film in Moonrise Kingdom or the use of the 4:3 aspect ratio in mid-90s. I think that the recent popularity of lower quality mediums is because such formats loosely replicate the way we as humans experience memories. Film stocks like Super 8 have an unclear, distorted, and blurred aesthetic that makes even the most mundane things in life look like a pleasant memory that's slowly fading away. Since the cartoons I watched as a kid were usually VHS tapes, I decided that this could be the most fitting medium to add a bit more nostalgia to my animation. I first started by applying a digital preset by Red Giant that mimics the look of a VHS tape. Though it looked reasonably well, I wasn't quite satisfied with the result. I wanted to make a more authentic effect that would feature some of the flickers, glitches, and artifacts that VHS tapes used to have. Since I had been a fan of the musician Jack Stauber, who makes MS Paint and stop-motion music videos featuring the VHS aesthetic, I decided to see if he has shared his workflow. After some research, it turned out that he records video to tape and then digitalizes it back to his computer. So I did exactly that. I looked around the Facebook marketplace for a while and found an old VCR alongside a handful of VHS tapes. I proceeded to record my final video on tape a bunch of times, afterwards capturing it back to my computer. Though this process is quite unpredictable, it got me much closer to the effect I was looking for. So, without further ado, here is my final moving image piece. I guess my main conclusion after this project is over is that stop motion is something that I definitely want to try again. One thing that I will have to keep in mind, however, is to allow myself more time to animate. In the future, I would also like to build more advanced puppets, so I would be able to expand on my stories. Thanks for watching.